Okay, today we're going to pull out all 5 model ranges from Fender's American lineup. We're going to compare all the USA Strats so you don't have to. Let's get into it. Hello ladies and gents, Jack here from Peach Guitars. Hope you're doing very well. Today is a part 2. If you haven't seen part 1, it'll be linked in the description below. What we did there was we took each of the 5 model ranges that Fender now offers in its USA lineup for Telecasters. Today we're going to apply that exact same logic to Strats. This is something that a lot of people were asking for in that original video, so we're glad to be able to deliver part 2. So I think we wanted to make this video mainly because there's kind of the classic ideal that people have of an American Strat. Although it's classic, it's kind of different for every player. So when you go onto Fender's website or the Peach Guitars website, whatever it might be, suddenly you're met with a plethora of different styles, different kind of vintage inspired designs, some way more contemporary. It's very hard to actually nail it down to just one American Strat. Now there is definitely cause to own more than one, and hopefully in this video, by breaking down different proponents of each range, I'll kind of give you a little bit of information that maybe you didn't have, or maybe you did have, and I've just helped to kind of file it all together. So, without further ado, let's get into the specifics of each model. We're going to start off though with a back-to-back tone comparison so you can hear the differences highlighted for yourself. Okay, so we're going to start off here with guitar number 1. This is the American Performer. Number 1 point that I want to talk about with the American Performer is how comfortable this neck is. It's a satin finish neck, so if you're coming from maybe a less expensive guitar, maybe a less expensive Fender even, or a Squire or any other kind of similar Strat design, you're going to become very much at home on this kind of guitar very quickly. I think this is such a comfortable neck profile. They've gone for their modern C-shaped profile, so it's quite a thin neck. I'm not talking like super modern flat feeling, but compared to a more vintage style neck, this is a little skinnier. It's very easy to get your hands across. This is definitely a kind of guitar that fits all kinds of players. It's not just for those vintage enthusiasts. So carrying on with the neck, you've got a 9.5-inch radius with jumbo frets. Really comfortable to kind of play chords or single note lead lines, whatever you want to do. It's just a very comfortable neck. I'm using that word comfortable a lot, but that's kind of the striking overpowering feature of this guitar. Now point number 2 I want to talk about is the way this thing sounds. So the pickups in here are proprietary American Performer Yosemite pickups. Single coils, obviously. I don't know what magic they've put into these, but I think these are possibly, in my opinion, the best sounding American Strat single coil pickup design that they've currently got. They're just such a juicy sounding pickup without being overpowered, but at the same time you can apply this guitar to a more modern context, whether you're piling on effects or using higher gain. These pickups just follow you down every tonal avenue, and that's complemented by Fender's grease bucket tone circuit, which basically allows you to dull the tone at the high end frequencies without muddying the tone as you go down the control. Now, I believe this is also the first time that we've seen Fender adding in a rather premium feature into their most inexpensive American guitar range, which is this push-pull tone control down here on the second tone control, which allows you to add in the neck pickup to positions 1 and 2. So it gives you 7 total combinations of sounds, which is 2 more than you get from a traditional Strat setup. I think they're really usable sounds, and obviously it's really easy to access. But that's just one little attention to detail kind of touch that Fender have decided to incorporate, even way down here at their most affordable American guitar. Lastly, point number 3 is a little bit of a personal one, but I'm so pleased that they've decided to carry on with the big headstock 70s design. This is something that a lot of guitar players tend to shy away from. Most people don't really, or they're not crazy about Fender's 70s period, but pretty much all of my favorite Strat players throughout history have played 70s era Strats with the big headstock, so I just love that. Maybe it's nostalgia, maybe it does something different to the tone subliminally, I don't know, but I love the design, I love the way it looks, I love the way it feels. I'm really glad it's here. Right, so guitar number 2 is coming from the American Professional 2 family. This is arguably the perfect Strat for probably the greatest number of people. This is kind of the Goldilocks design. For those familiar with Fender's history, you'll know that the American Standard was always at the forefront of Fender's kind of more modern thinking design. Fender as a company anyway has always decided to maybe leave heritage on one hand and then always push forward with new player-friendly ideas on the other hand. And the Standard was always the way that they did that. That evolved more recently into the American Professional line. And now we've got the American Professional 2, which brought about a couple of further refinements, some new pickups and so on. and most importantly some new finishes. So this is kind of where you can get the craziest with the spec list on this guitar. There's tons of great finishes available, including this really cool Mercury finish, which is exclusive to the American Professional 2. You can also get a ton of variants, especially on the Strat, like guitars with humbuckers in the bridge, 2 humbucker versions, but for sake of comparison, all these guitars have traditional 3 single coil setups. Okay, point number 2 I want to talk about on this guitar is the tone, and once again this is kind of that Goldilocks sweet spot right in the middle. You've got just enough of that vintage warmth and juiciness combined with a little bit more of a modern approach with their new V-Mod 2 pickups. These pickups have this kind of really bell-like crystalline quality to the high-end frequencies, which some of the other guitars don't necessarily have, which allows you to just do more with this than you could do with a more vintage specific Strat. It's also complemented by the same, this time it's a push-push control down here on tone control 2 to add in the neck pickup once again to positions 1 and 2. So you get a total of 7 different sounds on this Strat. Now this is the first range as well that we see the introduction of Fender's different bridge design. Traditionally it's always been about the 6-screw bridge, and purists and traditionalists of the brand will say that that is the only acceptable option, but I've always really loved their 2-post trem design here. It just affords you way more tuning stability. You can really get all those nice flutters with the trem that you can't necessarily do with a vintage style bridge, and this guitar has been upgraded with a cold rolled steel block as well for increased sustain, and once again it helps a little bit with the tuning stability. So that's the aesthetics covered, that's the tone covered. Point number 3 that I want to talk about is just how comfortable once again this neck is. Rather than the modern C profile, which is a little slimmer on the American Performer, this guitar has a deep C profile, so it feels a little bit kind of fuller in the hand, but it's still got that very comfortable linear kind of sweep to it of the C profile. You've got hand-rolled edges on this as well, so it feels extremely smooth all the way up the neck. It's complemented by some really nice big jumbo frets once again. It's just an absolute joy to play this neck. Whatever kind of style you're going for, the neck just really molds into your hand. And once again, fitting with the theme of all the other points I made, it is really kind of the sweet spot. It is the one that most people are going to feel most comfortable on. Right, guitar number 3 comes from what is probably the most popular, with all the purists anyway, range of Fender's American lineup, and this is definitely the one for those who just love everything about the brand's history, and maybe if you can't quite stretch to a custom shop budget, this is the range to look at. So right here I've got the American original 50s, there's also a 60s Strat which has a rosewood fingerboard, slightly different spec. So point number 1 I kind of touched on in the introduction to this range here. This is genuinely the closest that you can get to a custom shop spec and quality in Fender's standard USA lineup, kind of an off-the-shelf design. You've got enough kind of variety in the range to be able to satisfy any of your needs if you're looking for vintage kind of Strat designs, which most people going to custom shop are doing. This is the very closest way that you can get there. So all of the hardware and the specs are kind of vintage correct. You've got the only guitar here, by the way, with a 7¼ inch radius, which means that the fingerboard is a little bit more curved, like the guitars were back in the day. It's a little bit more comfortable, I think, for chording. But the nice thing is they've kind of combated the traditional fretting out issues that you'd have with this radius by giving you tall vintage frets. Point number 2 that I want to talk about is another exclusive feature for all the guitars here. This is the only guitar with a nitrocellulose lacquer finish. And basically the nitro finish allows the guitar, theoretically at least, to breathe a little bit more. The wood is a little bit more resonant than a poly finish, which all the other guitars here have. It also, and this is a sticking point for a lot of people, tends to age a little bit faster. That's why you see all those great beaten up old looking guitars. But you can get that out of the box here, but you can do the damage, if you want to consider it damage anyway, yourself. This is a nice thin finish, so the wood is really open, sounds great, looks great over time. Or if you really want to be careful, you can just keep this thing pristine for as long as you can. Point number 3, and I think this is kind of the biggest sticking point with the original lineup compared to the American vintage, which this range succeeds. Basically with the vintage they decided to give you year specific specs. So you had, for example, a 57, or maybe it's a 56 I believe, and a 59. What they've done here, which I think makes a lot more sense, is they've kind of amalgamated all of that decade's spec changes. So all of the different evolutionary spec changes that Fender went through in the 50s, they've kind of just thrown all the best, or the greatest hits, if you will, into this one American original lineup. So what that means, by way of example, is that you've got, for example here, an early 50s two-tone sunburst finish, but they've complemented it with a mid-50s soft V neck profile, like you'd get kind of around 56, 57, and then to top it all off, they've gone to the end of the decade with pure 59 vintage pickups, or pure vintage 59, I should say, pickups here. So it's kind of a little bit of all things, and it makes these guitars genuinely a little bit more versatile and usable than the American vintage guitars that came before them. Okay, second to last guitar I'm going to talk about today is probably the most contentious one here. This is the one that a lot of people, when it came out, didn't really understand, given Fender's long-standing history of making vintage-style instruments. So the Ultra is for the modern guitar player. This is the kind of thing that Fender haven't done before. It's really their most modern design, and what I mean by modern is it's a lot sleeker. I mean, the original Strat design, a lot of people would argue, is kind of a very stealthy, sexy shape anyway, but what they've done here is just further all those points and kind of exaggerated its features. So you've got a lot more sculpting on the back with the body contours. You've got a far more accessible upper neck section here as well, so you've got an extended body contour here as well. Everything's just a little bit sleeker, feels a little bit more modern, and kind of easy to get to grips with. That is if you're coming from other similarly contemporary guitar designs. If you are, though, a Fender purist and you've only ever played vintage style instruments, this is going to take a minute to get used to, but when you do, it offers you something legitimately different to everything else that's here. So point number two, I kind of alluded to back there in point one, the ultra noiseless pickups on this guitar is kind of the latest technology that they've got now with their noiseless designs. It's never going to be for everybody. Some people just love to have that kind of all guns blazing hum that you get from a single coil pickup. There's no other way to put it. However, some people genuinely need to be rid of that. If you're playing in a studio setting, or if you're playing with a lot of gain, or if you're really playing with detailed, kind of heavy processed, effects-laden tones as well, these noiseless pickups really do the trick. So what you kind of lose slightly in a little bit of that vintage warmth and juicy character, you gain in sheer pragmatic ability to use this guitar in more situations. You've got a slightly different take on the adding in extra tones here. You've got Fender's S1 switch, which hides here in the volume control. So you push that, and once again, same as the other guitars, you get the option to add in the neck pickup to these lower positions 1 and 2. You also have the really cool no-load tone control. So down here on the second tone control for the bridge, you feel a little click when you get up to position 10, which takes the tone circuit out of the signal chain. So you get a little bit of extended top end, a little bit more output, and then as soon as you roll it back, it's active again. So with all of those other things I've talked about, kind of leads me on to point 3, which is basically that this is the best for high performance range here. So if you're the kind of player that really wants to push your instrument a little bit further, or if you're kind of a tinkerer and you've always modified your existing guitars to make them a little bit more player friendly, Fender have done that for you out of the box. They've kind of applied all of the attributes that they think necessary to make this guitar the best that it can possibly perform. So on to the final range of today's comparison, and this is the newest addition to Fender's USA lineup, the Ultra Luxe. Now obviously the name suggests exactly what this is. This is a simple continuation of the Ultra lineup. So everything I just talked about with that previous range still applies here, but they've just decided to tweak it ever so slightly further to offer stuff to players that they've never offered before. Stainless steel frets make their first appearance on a Fender USA guitar in history. This was something that really took people by a little bit of surprise. I mean, it's not the biggest deal in the world, obviously, but when this came out, people were really quite surprised that Fender actually did this. For those who don't know what stainless steel frets are all about, they're basically a far more hard-wearing material that other boutique builders have been using for some time. The trade-off is that you do get a slightly different tone. You get a little bit more of a zingy kind of top end, which I actually kind of really like. Once you get used to it, you don't really notice it anymore. But you get that increased durability. Like I said, you kind of get these frets the way you like them, and they never wear out. That's kind of the beauty of them. We actually covered this range in a lot more detail in a separate video, which will be linked down below. But it's just a little bit more of that ultra sensibility. If you like what those guitars are about, and you want the kind of best performing instrument that you can get, this just takes things a little bit further with a couple of slight spec changes, like those frets. Now, one big thing that I was also quite surprised to notice here is that the Ultra Luxe guitars are fitted with ash bodies rather than older. Now, back in 2020, Fender made an announcement that they wouldn't be using ash bodies anymore, I guess for availability reasons, so I don't know how or why they've reintroduced it here with the Ultra Luxe. But I think it makes a little bit of a kind of more concrete determination between this and the standard Ultra. The ash body is a little bit weightier. I think maybe it's a little bit more resonant sounding as well because of that. And I like that you get a little bit more of the grain showing through. So point number 3 kind of just throws everything in together here. This is genuinely the most modern Fender design that they've ever come up with. That is not going to be for everybody, and I'm sure that you will be the first to comment down below with your thoughts if that's you. But for the player who's never considered Fender before because they've never quite ticked these boxes, now you can come on board with arguably one of the biggest guitar builders of all time, one of the most important guitar brands, and they've got a product that is genuinely right for you that you don't need to take to your bespoke luthier. Alright folks, there we go. I hope you've enjoyed today's overview of Fender's USA lineup of Strats. If you haven't seen it, like I said, there is a part 1 to this video, which was the same thing with Telecasters. So if you're interested to hear those same differences explained for the Telecaster platform, click the link in the description below and you can check that video out as well. But hopefully I've sort of flattened out some of the questions that you may have had regarding USA Strats. If you've got any more questions though, you can click the links in the description down below to each of these individual guitars. You can check out the full specs, get pricing information, check out listing photos, and all that good stuff over on our website. So hopefully I've explained the differences and similarities here, but most importantly of all, I would like to know your thoughts. So let me know in the comments below which of these 5 guitars ticks all the boxes for you. Maybe there's a couple. Maybe you can genuinely see a couple of these guitars being in your life. Whatever it is, let me know your thoughts down in the comment sections below. And if you've enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like. And if you're new to the channel, hit subscribe, ring the bell. You know exactly what to do by this point. But yes, please do all those things. Thank you very much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.